I'm here today with first a pleasure and also a jealousy. The pleasure I have is to introduce you to our Chancellor, whom I'm sure everybody in this room already knows. But today we have a distinguished guest from the world of sports. And this is one of those events that makes our Chancellor exceedingly happy because he also began in the world of sports. As a student athlete at Northeastern University, and certainly moved through his life in a way that athlete only became a piece of what he did. Student led him to who he is today as the chancellor of this great institution. My jealousy is I had the pleasure this morning of spending time and listening to our guest, and I don't have the honor of introducing her. That honor goes to our chancellor, but I'm jealous. And with that, Dr. J. Keith Motley.
So good afternoon, everybody. I thought you all had finals or something that you had to be at, or what's going on with that? Listen, he's talking about, your vice chancellor is talking about being jealous. He didn't tell you that he rode our guest from downtown to this space, and the chancellor was riding by himself. But I want to thank Charlie, and I want to thank all of you for being out and giving our guest today a wonderful University of Massachusetts, Boston welcome. So good afternoon and welcome to everyone, students, faculty, staff, community members. Thank you all for being here today. I'm glad you are here with us for this exciting event, a conversation with the great Marion Jones. I'd like to start by thanking Glenn Mangorian, who is going to be part of this conversation, in fact, leading this conversation today. Glenn is a University of Massachusetts Amherst alum, and we won't hold that against him. He's a much respected business consultant and speaker, and a great friend of this university because it is a university that has its wings throughout this Commonwealth, and this young man has been a blessing to this campus. It's because of this speaker series, Uncommon Leadership, that we were able to invite our guest, Marion Jones, to campus today. Glenn began this series in 2006, and he's interviewed all kinds of people. None like the one he's going to interview today, but I'll just mention a few. Keith Lockhart, Vicki Kennedy, Click and Clack, and the Tappet brothers from NPR's Car Talk. He's also a sought-after speaker himself who combines his background in business. I'm so glad to see you all. I was worried about that side of the room getting filled up. I was all off balance for a minute. Now I can look on this side when I'm talking. How are you? We're so grateful to have you here. But Glenn has led many organizations and is also an uncommon leader in his own right. This is the first time that we hosted an uncommon leadership event on this campus. And we've been talking about it all week, all month, just getting excited about wanting to be here. Glenn, we're so grateful to you for this opportunity. And I'm also glad, give him a round of applause. And so I'm going to get on because we want to welcome the star of our show this afternoon, Marion Jones. Thank you for coming to this beautiful campus. I told you it was something else. I told you they had like waterside downtown, and we got waterfront, oceanfront out here. But I also told you that we had unbelievable students and faculty and staff here, and it would be a wonderful chance for you to sort of get into the University of Massachusetts spirit. Marion went to the Tar Heel championship basketball team and led them there, but she also went from that to Olympic champion, gold medalist, to a lightning rod after that of what some people might call controversy. But what we all know is that if you're leading anything, there are times when there are things that aren't going to go the way you might want them to go, and it's about It shows a lot of courage, and it shows a lot of compassion. It also shows a lot of retrospect when you can look at things and determine whether or not they've been wonderful things that are occurring in your life, and you're going to hear about that in a moment, because it's a fast drop from the top to what some might consider the bottom. But sometimes the view from the bottom gives you a way to look at your life in ways that are transformative and also informative. And you can share, when you can share those things with the world in the way that Marion is about to with you, and that she's done since those days, it's an amazing opportunity for growth that we don't even know that we have room for sometimes because of what the world is telling you. But also, it's a wonderful opportunity for reflection. I know that you all are about to enter into your finals, students, but you're also about to enter into your finals, faculty and staff. I know that's a tense time. So relax, do some reflecting on your own, and welcome our guests, Marion Jones, along with Glenn, to the rostrum. She has made it her mission to share the lessons she's learned, and she's going to share those with the world, and that lesson is about redemption on this path to the next steps in your life. And so, Marion, welcome. We're so grateful to have you.
Marion, this is the American dream.
Yeah.
This is the American dream.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? It's hard to see you all, but
Now,
let me start off by saying it's a pleasure for me to be here and getting an opportunity to speak with you all. It has seemed like a whirlwind few days. I got in on Wednesday night, and I had an event to attend and speak yesterday, but I'm most thrilled to be here in front of you all, and I hope that you guys, as the Chancellor said, just open up your minds and your hearts for the next 30 minutes, and hopefully what you hear will inspire, motivate, and help you just live a better life.
now, many in this room know your story, but before we begin, I know you have a short video that encapsulates pieces of your story that might help kick this off. So let's show that video.
Beginning, I knew that I was faster than most other people. Started getting the phone calls from different sponsors.
I was the star going into the first Olympics.
I've never taken a performance-enhancing drug, and I never will.
Her doing what was expected of her, winning, putting that on the line.
I want all of you to know that today I pled guilty to 2 counts of making false statements to federal agents.
Jones must surrender herself to authorities by March 11th, although she'll likely turn herself in before that.
Because of my actions, I am retiring from the sport of track and field.
Marion Jones was on her way to becoming the greatest track and field athlete, man or woman, who ever lived.
Marion Jones is a free woman. The disgraced sprinter was released from a federal prison in San Antonio.
Funny, you never know how your life is going to change, and you think that you kind of know it all.
Now you say I'm from round away, yo, and yesterday was
I wouldn't advise properly, and I made a mistake. However, I'm coming back on my mistake, and she don't want them to make the same mistake.
no matter the fashion of my hair, my shoes, I will always do just what I choose. Don't expect of me what you would do. We were raised differently, I ain't you, but that don't
Never in my life did I imagine that I'd be speaking in front of you all. I never imagined that I would have gone to prison.
be exactly what
I think
she's making a bigger difference than when she was running, because now she's able to get out and speak to the youth and try to help someone else.
She's confronted her past. She's accepted it, learned lessons from it.
She is 34 years old. She hasn't played competitive basketball in a dozen years.
But I remember when she was in college. I think it's fantastic. She needs to do something physical because that's what kind of person she is.
You don't come across pure athletes often. But she's like shooting these jumpers all in my face. I'm like, hold up, track girl.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, you know, and that's why I think right now there's no telling what Marion's going to do, because, you know, she is probably right now one of the strongest women in the world.
If you don't see somebody who has been down here, if you don't see them crawling back up and getting back up here, you know, you think that it can't happen. I'm in it to win it. That's what they say, right?
I think it'll be in the eyes of the beholder, and I know that in my eyes, Marion will always be one of the greatest professional athletes to have graced this earth.
So Mary and I had an opportunity to have a conversation at lunchtime with a number of alums, and this is going to be a little bit different because we're going to gear it toward you, toward the students and especially student athletes. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers, but for about 20 minutes, Mary and I will have a conversation and you'll get to eavesdrop. Let me start, since we have a lot of students here that are thinking about their future and what they want to be when they grow up. What did you want to be when you were, growing up in Los Angeles, when you were a young kid?
Well, I wanted to be great. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I realized at a very early age that whatever I decided to get into, I wanted to be a superstar. I am from Los Angeles originally, and in 1984 the Olympics came to Los Angeles, and I witnessed firsthand how athletes achieved greatness, and I wrote on my chalkboard at age 9 that I wanted to be an Olympic champion, and I wanted to achieve greatness.
At age 9?
9.
And how long after that did you make the Olympic team?
I made my first Olympic team at age 14.
5 years later, she makes the Olympic team.
Well, back up a little bit. I mean, it just didn't happen like that. I just have been blessed with an incredible amount of talent. I mean, it's not anything, a lot of it is what I've done, but most of it it's just a blessing. And my mom and I, it's just my brother and I have one older brother. My mom is a single mom, raised both of us, and she and I realized at an early age that there was something special going on with me, and she sacrificed, worked lots of jobs to get me the best coaches, the best equipment, and to cultivate all that this was. And I was very disciplined as a child in regards to my training and my sports. I mean, other than that, I was a mess. But in regards to that, I knew what I wanted, and she never, ever had to force me, make me go to practice, train, play. I knew how much work it took to achieve greatness, and I loved it. I really, really, really did.
And did you play pickup basketball with the guys?
Yeah, I have one older brother, and we played a lot of sports, including basketball. I mean, you name it. I participated in soccer, track and field, basketball, volleyball. So I was a tomboy as a child, and was very much involved in lots of things.
Do you hold any high school records in California?
Oh yeah. That is so long ago. I was speaking with some folks earlier, and that, it's like that's another life. When I sit here and I watch that video, I very rarely watch myself on TV. I'm extremely critical. I'm a perfectionist, and so when I do have to sit and watch it, it's difficult for one. But even two, I criticize myself. Gosh, you should have said it a little bit differently. You should have, even in the running, I'm looking at the running technique, and I'm like, gosh, if your arm, that's just how I am. And so it's a challenge for me to look at those type of things.
But the colleges came knocking on your door.
Sure.
They were watching those tapes and they were seeing some different things
Well,
maybe
sure. I
than
mean,
you were.
at the age of 14, I made the Olympic team, and so I got the attention of every college and university in the country. And I, during that time, was developing my skills in basketball. And I decided that I wanted to attend the University of North Carolina for a few reasons. I'm a Tar Heel, but I wanted to go there. I had an interest in journalism, and they had one of the top schools in the country, and I wanted to play basketball and run track, and I accepted a basketball scholarship there. I was 17 years old when I stepped on campus, and I started my college career.
And after you graduated, you set your eyes on the 2004 Olympics, 2000 Olympics?
I graduated in 1997, and I primarily participated in basketball while in school. I was under a basketball scholarship, so they seemed to get a hold of me the most. But I missed the sport of track and field, and when I graduated, I felt a void. I felt that I hadn't achieved the greatness that I had coveted so much as a child in the sport of track and field, and so I decided to go back to my first love, which was track and field, and attempt this shot at winning these medals and becoming an Olympic champion.
And tell us what's involved in preparing yourself, training, going from graduating from UNC to making it on the Olympic team. What sort of regimens, coaches that you have to have,
Well,
dietary things?
You have to sacrifice everything for your dream. It's similar to other goals or dreams people have. You put everything else on the back burner when you have something set in your mind, and that's the same way this was. It was just really at an elite level. I was 7, 8, 9 hours a day were dedicated to training, and it seems like a lot, but I like to tell people that was my job, that was my career. And so there was a lot of changes. For the first time, I realized that I can't do it by myself. You need expert coaches. You need people in your life who are knowledgeable about certain things. You have to supplement your diet and take vitamins and supplements, and these are all things that I was learning after I graduated.
And what types of people were you coming in contact with during this time?
Well, after I graduated in 1997, I achieved a lot of success in the sport very quickly. 11 months after graduating, I was U.S. national champion in 3 different events. I was top 5 in the world. And so things happened very quickly, and success just seemed to descend on me with an enormous amount of speed. No pun intended, but so I started making lots of money. I was on the cover of lots of magazines, from Time, Sports Illustrated, Vogue, and things seemed to be going very well. And when that happens, a lot of people start making their way into your life that want some of that. And I made the unfortunate choice. I can pinpoint it now. I made the unfortunate choice at that time to surround myself with people who would kind of boost up my ego, who would constantly pat me on the back and say, "You're great," and started distancing myself from people who would give it to me straight. Like, my relationship with my mother was strained at that time, and my relationship with certain friends who wouldn't candy coat certain things, and so I distanced myself with them because people were around me telling me things that I wanted to hear. And so I not a lot of people can pinpoint a moment that you really wish that you can change, and I wish that I hadn't done that. I wish I had surrounded myself at that critical point in my life and in my career around people who loved on Marion for me, not for Marion Jones, what I could do for you, but just for me.
And you put a lot of trust in a lot of those people also. Now the 2000 games come and you win 5 medals.
Right.
And no other woman had ever won 5 medals, and I don't believe any other woman has ever won 5 medals since then.
That's correct.
So not only were you famous before, but now after, you're really on top of the world. And fame is very intoxicating, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, I tell people I have now the opportunity to travel around the world and sharing my journey and my struggle, and I like to tell young people sometimes be careful what you wish for. I remember when I was really young, I wanted so bad for my name, just my name, to be in the local paper, right? And now sometimes I wish it wasn't there. Right? And I remember when I got a little bit older, I wanted so bad for my name to be on my shoes, because that was a sign of success. And just be careful what you wish for.
Well, after the 2000 Olympics, the Balco name started to become in the newspaper. And your name was associated with Balco, as were many other athletes at the time. Maybe you can explain to the students what transpired.
Well, in 2000, after 2000, there was a huge investigation. Federal investigators were investigating a company that had claimed that it had been making nutritional supplements for athletes, when indeed they were creating performance-enhancing drugs for athletes. And so the federal government was investigating this, and were inviting athletes in to interview them to find out what they knew about it. And in 2003, I was asked by federal investigators to come in and share my knowledge about this particular company and what I knew. And of course, I had known the company. I had been in contact with them. My coach at the time had a relationship with the owner. And so in 2003, at that meeting, federal investigators were asking me questions. They were quite aggressive. I had attorneys on both sides of me who had briefed me prior to the meeting that if I ever, during the interview, felt uncomfortable, or if I needed to seek counsel or get advice, to just kind of call a timeout and step outside with my attorneys, and they would guide me in the best way to approach the situation. And so while federal investigators in a 2-3 hour interview, or as we like to say now, badgering me with questions, they pulled out a Ziploc bag out of their briefcase, and they were shaking it almost in my face, asking me if I had ever seen the substance that was inside. And when they took it out, I immediately recognized that it was something that I had been given a few years prior to the games by my coach, and unbeknownst to me, it was actually a performance-enhancing drug. But in the span of 30 seconds, after seeing what it was and realizing that if I admitted that I had been given this, if I had actually admit that I had taken a performance-enhancing drug, then everything that I had trained for, prayed for, dreamed of would be taken away from me. Because all people would hear was that I took a performance-enhancing drug. They wouldn't hear, well, that I didn't know what it was. That would all kind of be pushed to the back. And so in the span of 30 seconds, I made the choice to lie. I made the choice to tell federal investigators that I did not know what it was. And because of that, fast forward 4 years later, I pled guilty to the charges of lying to federal investigators.
And what transpired during those 4 years after you lied and to the point?
Yeah, it was a heavy, heavy burden to carry. I mean, as we all know, when you tell a lie, and especially if it starts out as a little fib, and you cover it up, or you try and forget it or put it away, it just becomes heavy. And it becomes heavy on your shoulders, and having to constantly tell bigger lies on top of that. It just got to be so much. Also in 2003, I had my first child. I have 3 now. I have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. But at that time, I had just had my first son. And I can remember myself saying to him, trying to teach him the right way to do things. You know, when you make a mistake, son, what you have to do is you have to come and tell your parents. Tell us what you've done. We'll deal with it. You know, there'll be consequences, but then we'll move past it. So I'm teaching my son, trying to teach my son this, and I'm turning around looking in the mirror and realizing that I'm living a lie, that I'm a hypocrite. And of course that didn't sit well with me. So in 2007, my husband and I made the choice that it was time to start new. It was time to start fresh. And although the consequences were going to be harsh, and as I mentioned to you earlier, we didn't realize that they were going to be as harsh as they were, we made the choice to finally come clean and to share what I knew and what I had done and go from there.
As you said in your book, I won't read the full quote, but it said that the consequences of your choices, when you lie, they can tear you apart and wreck your spirit. So what you pointed to was the integrity issue of what you were telling your children and what you were living inside. And so you pled guilty and were sentenced to 6 months in federal prison. And you served 6 months in federal prison.
Right.
And how did those 6 months change your life?
It was profound. Probably the hardest times of my life. It is a feeling, and it's even hard to relive it so often. I share with young people that it would be wonderful for me to travel around the world talking about my successes and talking about my achievements in life. But my reality is that I travel around the world talking about my mistakes and my failures, in the hopes of trying to help others avoid certain things. And because of that, it's not an easy task being me now. But I like to say that I feel blessed that God thinks that I'm pretty strong enough to have taken me through certain things with the hopes that to help other people. But it was very hard to be there. No understatement. It's unlike any of the lockup shows that you see on television. Now, I was sentenced to probably one of the hardest federal prisons for women in the country. It's on a military base in Fort Worth, Texas. High security. I was in solitary confinement for 49 days, 23, sometimes 24 out of 24 hours a day in a cell by myself. And so because I was there, I had a lot of time, and I laugh at this, you have a lot of time on your hands. And what I did during that time was reflect. I reflected on who I was, on why I had made certain choices in my past, and now moving forward, now what am I going to do? You know, I can't go back to the sport that I love. My reputation is tarnished, and everything that I thought was a reality is no more. How in the world am I going to turn this wrong into a right? My 2 boys at that time had birthdays while I was in prison, so I missed those. In solitary confinement, you have no visitation with your family or friends. You have no contact. You cannot make phone calls. And so all I had while I was in there was my faith that things could and would get better. And so while I was in there, I thought, as I mentioned, how can I, when I get out of here, do something with my life positive? And that's how this whole take a break message came about. And what it is I thought, why, Marion, why did you make certain choices? What could I have done to not have made certain bad choices? And I thought, if I had just slowed down, no pun intended, if I had just taken a break in that meeting room, right? If I had just taken a break, taken a step back, thought about the consequences of my choices, thought about what would happen if I made a poor choice. If I had just taken a break, then things would have been a lot better. And so that's what I've done. I was released 6 months later, and I'll be honest with you, there were moments that I coveted the normal life of going back to Austin and being a mom and a wife and just living a normal life out of the public eye. And then I started to think, well, what a disappointment that would be if God's plan for me was to share my journey and my struggles with the hopes of helping people live a better life. And so I stepped out in faith, and I decided that I was going to take my Take a Break message all around, and with the hopes that people will hear this hard journey and think to themselves, gosh, yeah, it was a tough road, but I don't have to go down that same road. And if I think about my choices more carefully, and it just doesn't have to do with elite athletes. This particular issue applies to every single person in this room. We all encounter choices in our life where if we just slow down, if we just think about the consequences, then the chances of us making a better choice are higher.
You know, you mentioned earlier you were raised by a single mom, and I'm willing to bet that there are many in this audience that are raised by a single parent, probably a single mom in which there is not a father there. What advice would you have to them about staying on the right track? There's so many temptations for them. This is their college years. There's a lot of peer pressure. What advice would you give to them directly?
Well, I mean, I am 36 years old now. I have had a wonderful college experience. I know the temptations. I know the fun times that can be had. But what I would recommend is that even throughout all of this, certainly embrace every day, every moment, because college only happens once, as you know, in your life, maybe a couple times for some people. But that's one of the things that I share is that for you all to just be very cautious, mindful of the people whom you surround yourself with, because I've found in my life that if you surround yourself with good, positive people who are making good choices in their own life, and if you're hanging around them, that's going to rub off on you. But if you find yourself hanging out with people who, a lot of things, who have high drama in their life, who are always trying to get into some type of trouble, the chances of you following are pretty high. And so it's one of the things that I share. Just be careful the people whom you hang out with. You know, you don't have to just think, are these people good or are they bad? And you know, one of the other pieces of advice that I share with young people is, you know, when you get to that point in your life where you have to make really tough choices, right? Seek advice from people who have real life experience, not your peers, you know, who are going through the same things as you. It doesn't have to be your mom. It doesn't have to be your dad. I know about sometimes not wanting to have to go to your parents. I get that. But people in your life who you know who have lived through things and who will give it to you straight, who won't candy coat it, who will say, you know, Bobby, you know, you're full of whatever, you know. Instead of distancing yourself from those type of the people, those people will keep you grounded. And you know, I think if you use that advice, you'll be okay.
Now, how about to the student athletes who say, you know, I just want to get an edge? You know, it's just a tough world. It's very competitive. If I can just get a little bit of an edge.
Well, I mean, the same applies to them. I mean, my message is universal. It you know, is not focused on one group of people, thankfully. And it just comes down to decision making. I mean, we all know the difference between right and wrong. And ultimately, you know, you're lying to yourself, you know, in certain situations like that. Think about, I mean, I know that mostly students in here and you don't have kids, but think about when you have kids, you know, everything that you say and you do, and I like to say, in my case, things that you don't say will affect your future. It will affect your future. You have this whole generation of social networking and all of that, and people posting things on their Facebook and Twitter now, and thinking that it's not going to affect your future. It blows my mind. I mean, this stuff is there now for life. You post images, you post things that you think are cool now and that will impress your friends, and someday it can affect you whether or not you get a job. You know, it's as simple as that. So decision making, that's the big thing. Decision making, arming yourself with the knowledge and the tools to make good, positive choices in your life.
I'm going to allow students to ask you questions.
Okay.
But before I do that, I'm going to ask a question that I'm sure they all want to know. What's on your iPod?
I'm going to really tell my age now, but I'm old school. I love Anita Baker. I love Lenny Kravitz. I'm a big Tracy Chapman fan. I like to joke that I played 2 seasons in the WNBA. After not having played basketball for over 13 years, I made the WNBA. And so, as you can imagine, some of my teammates were a lot younger than me, right? And even though I am blessed genetically and I look still young, I have no idea of in the rap world and rappers now and that type of music. And
They'll tell you about
I made the mistake of telling my teammates, who some were more than 10 years younger than me, I made the mistake one day in the locker room and saying, you know, if this rapper guy, T.I., if he walked in this locker room, I wouldn't know who he was for Adam. But yeah, I like old school music. I like gospel. I listen to a lot of nursery rhymes these days since I have 3 little ones. And so culturally, I'm really starving right now.
Okay, some questions. You can either make your way to
it would be a lot easier if you guys go to this
you can
microphone,
do that.
because I can't see anything.
We can't see. We've got lights on us. I can't see if anybody has their hand up over there. Are there any questions out there?
Sure there are.
Yes. Go ahead. You beat them to it.
Good afternoon.
Question.
Can you turn that mic on?
Oh, what do I do? It's on? Is it
Yes,
on now?
it is.
I'm very curious about, you talked earlier about your relationship to your mother and how she was very much of a disciplinarian. I'm wondering how she reacted when you fell from grace and what she had to say.
Well, it's funny because she was a disciplinarian, but she's mom, and moms love their kids no matter what. And I knew, even during those times where I distanced myself from people who would keep it real with me, I knew that she would keep it real with me, and so that's why I distanced myself from her. But you know, she's my #1 supporter. When I stood on those courtroom steps, as you saw in that video, I don't know if you could see in that, but she was right behind me. I mean, every step of the way, she's there. And I know she'll always be there.
Did she have some words, though, in private for you?
Well, my family is from the country of Belize.
Oh, okay.
In Central America.
Right.
And so we speak Creole in Belize, and so she had some interesting words for me, which I won't share. But no,
you won't share?
Generally came down to, it just generally came down to, you know your choices were poor. It's never, the best time is now to make good choices. Like, you know, make a difference now for yourself and your kids. You know,
And you're very close to your brother also.
Yeah, be that example to them. And it's one of the reasons why I made the choice to play basketball again, because I wanted to be a living example to my kids. That once you make a mistake, or once you fall down, because you'll all make a mistake at one day in your life, it's what you do afterwards that counts. And so my kids are now old enough to actually see me on the court, and they don't know my full story yet, but one day they will. And you know what? They'll be able to say, she was playing basketball. She was inspiring and motivating people by traveling after all of this happened. You know, and that was important for me. And it's one of the reasons why I travel and I share and I sacrifice being away from them. I'm a mom. I love my kids. I would much rather be at home, picking them up from school, helping them with their homework, than talking about my mistakes and my failures. But it's all for one day for them, you know, to be proud.
So the lesson then is always get up after you fall.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Don't give up once you make a mistake. We'll all do. It's what you do afterwards that really, really counts.
Yes, go ahead.
First and foremost, thank you very much for visiting our university. You mentioned taking a break, and if we take that break, then we'll know the difference between right and wrong. But knowing the difference between right and wrong and actually doing the right thing is a very different thing. So what advice do you have for students in reference to exercising the courage to do the right thing when there's so much pressure to do the wrong thing?
The whole point of take a break is that you don't make a rush decision. Right? When you make a rough decision, sometimes right and wrong bleeds in with each other, and it's hard to separate. But if you take a break, if you take a moment, it doesn't have, and there's no time frame. It doesn't have to be 20 seconds, a minute. Remove yourself from this situation, however that may be. You might pretend like you have a phone call. You might go to the bathroom. You just stop and think, okay, then the chances of you making a better choice are higher. Do you know what I mean? Don't make a rush decision, especially when it's something big. You know? Thank you for the question.
I just want to know, what role has spirituality have in your development as a person?
Great question. Well,
What role has spirituality played for you?
Well, I'll be honest. Before everything that happened in my life occurred, there was not a lot of faith in my life. It was one of those types where when I won a big race, I would thank God. But when I was struggling, I relied on me, thinking that I could do it all. And I found while I was incarcerated, and particularly while I was in solitary confinement, that I had nothing, I had nobody else, I had no money. All I had was a Bible, and I like to joke, and I had my Sudoku. But all I had was my faith to hold on to. I did not have a warm embrace from a loved one telling me that things would get better. I did not have a phone call from somebody trying to keep my spirits up. All I had was the faith, the hope that things had to get better, and they would. And they have. And I tell people, how in the world can it be that in the span of 3 years that I could have been in solitary confinement, right, to now I have this incredible opportunity to share my story, to play professional basketball. That can't just be me. Like, I'm pretty tough and strong, but there has to be somebody, something else that's working in our lives to get me from there to here now. And I acknowledge that, and it's what has gotten me through, and it's a big part of my life.
I agree. Thank you.
What I would add to that is that it's not a coincidence that you are here listening to Marion today. So there's a purpose for you being here, sitting where you are, listening to Marion, just as much as there is a purpose for Marion being here speaking to you. Yes?
How you doing?
Good.
You talked about being blessed with a lot of talent, and you also talked about how you had no idea you were taking the performance enhancement. Do you think that it affected you, or do you think that it was still you and your talent?
I absolutely feel that I would have won. I would have won the medals, and that I would have still broken the records. And that's the hard thing to stomach, and that's the hard thing to face, knowing that, that because of poor choices, because of ignoring red flags, because of surrounding myself with certain people, because of all of these things, it's all gone, it's all lost. Well, it's here, it's in my memory, it's in my heart, it can't be taken away. But the record books, and so because of that, it's tough, knowing that even without having been given certain things, that success would have been still off the charts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming to the campus and for taking the depth of responsibility that you have taken for your acts. However, I remember when I read about your story in the newspaper, I thought, how many athletes who have committed worse crimes have ended up in jail as you have? And so the question I have for you is even in the context of taking responsibility, have you considered the racial disparities in incarceration in general in this country and in your situation in particular?
I have, you know, and I can't think of, you can maybe help me out, Rich, but I think I have been the only athlete that has served any type of prison time because of this whole situation. Because of that, I'm the only athlete, I'm the only female, and all of that. But, you know, I have found that if I spend even an iota of time focusing on what I had to go through and what other people probably should have had to, then I can't focus on the future. You know, and I'm at a place now where I really feel that in my heart of hearts that everything that I've been through has been a blessing, right? Like, I wouldn't wish it on my enemy, but I'm glad I went through it. I'm glad I went through it because it forced me to prioritize my life. It forced me to figure out what's important, and it's not how much money we make. You know, it's not, in my case, how many medals, how many covers of the magazines I'm on, what type of car you drive. That's not what's important. What's important is how much you can give back to your neighbor. You know, and I don't think if I hadn't gone through that situation, if I would have slowed down long enough to self-reflect, right? So, like, not many people, you know, have 6 months or 49 days where they're just by themselves and they have no contact with the outside world, right? And so I have learned a tremendous amount about things that I never thought that I would really have an interest in prison reform. You know, before I went to prison, I didn't know, there was nobody in my family that had ever been. I knew nothing about it except what I saw on A&E, right? And because of my experience and how disappointed I was with the lack of resources and the women that I met who, for many, had committed one illegal act and had a prison term of 15 years, you know, and so people ask how I was able to get through that time in my life, and it was hard for me, and I mentioned my faith, but one of the other things that was, one of the other reasons I was able to get through it is because I would look down the hall, and I would look at women who had been incarcerated for 10, 15 years, who hadn't seen their family for that long, who hadn't received a letter or a card, and I would ask myself, gosh, I'm only in here for 6 months, and I'll see my kids, and I'll hug them, and I'll hold them, and so if they can get through it, if they can have the faith to get through, wake up every day with a smile on the face, then what the heck am I complaining about?
Marion. Let me read to you the last paragraph of her book, which to me sums up everything that Marion is saying. People have often asked me how I wish to be remembered. I don't want to be remembered for the records I broke, the races I won, or the medals I lost. I want to be remembered for the worst mistake I ever made and how I turned it into a life-affirming positive for the world. I want my children, when they grow up, to look at my life and see that I was remembered for all the right reasons. As someone who scales many hurdles, and when the course of life got rough and the paths were dark, I set out to make a difference, did my best, and stayed on the right track. Marion, you're on the right track.
Yeah,
thank you for coming. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all very much.
So this is the story of this university. We bring people in who have transformed their lives. And Marion, we're so grateful to have you here today as an example to all of us. And so we have a gift that we want you to wear.
Oh, not bake, not eat.
No, but listen, we got some of that for you too.
Okay.
That's going to go to the airport with you.
Okay.
But this is a University of Massachusetts Boston track outfit.
Okay.
We know that you have been fresh too. It got the creases still in it.
Hold it up.
Extra. Come on now. It looks real good. Somebody get that picture. Get that picture. All right.
Thank you.
Ooh, they said Mrs. Molly's going to be jealous. She's already jealous. She saw the pictures from earlier. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming out. Marion's going to have to get to the airport. We have a flight we have to catch, but we're going to bring her back again. Thank you all for coming. This is a continuing relationship. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.